Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona's 5th Congressional District, which is Mesa, Gilbert, Chandler, Queen Creek, essentially. He's in his first term, served in the Arizona legislature for 14 years, last 4 years as a Senate president. He's our guest this week on Newsmaker Sunday. Welcome back.
Thanks, John. Good to be with you.
Good to see you. So much going on in Washington. I want to start with tape number one. This is the president signing a massive budget. This was $1.3 trillion in spending. Look at that budget. I mean, that is obscene. More money for the military, yes. There will be more money for border security, yes. But you've got some issues in this, and I know you voted against it.
Yes.
You were one of 90 Republican lawmakers who voted against it.
That's correct.
Tell me why.
First of all, we didn't have, the process was horrible. I mean, you saw how big that stack of paper was. They gave it to us at 8:30 p.m. the night before and said, we're going to vote on this at noon tomorrow.
Nobody obviously read it.
Nobody read the bill. Nobody could read the bill. So the only people that knew what was in there are the staffers of the big four, which is the speaker and the minority leader, you know, Pelosi and those guys.
Right.
So nobody could read it. The second thing is they had what's called a closed rule. They would not let anybody amend the bill. So I went down, and at 12:30 in the morning, I was in front of the Rules Committee arguing for my amendments, presenting evidence why we should.
You offered up 2 or 3 amendments,
yes,
didn't you?
Yeah. And so the process, that's number one. The process was horrible.
What were the amendments you wanted, by the way?
I wanted to defund sanctuary cities, and I wanted to defund the Robert Mueller investigation. There were others that were, some people said, let's defund Planned Parenthood, no more funding for Planned Parenthood. And there were a whole series of amendments saying, let's reduce spending here or there. If we had known what was in here, there's money for a wall, just not on a border wall. It's in the Mideast somewhere we're building a wall. There's scholarship money for people in the Mideast and other nations. And you know, people just go, what's going on?
Of that $1.3 trillion, how much of that, in your view, just give me a round number, how much of that is just graft and waste?
I would say a good $100 to $200 billion is probably unnecessary.
Kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to borrow probably anywhere from $800 billion to $1 trillion probably of that to fund that.
So on principle, as a fiscal conservative, you said, I cannot buy into this. I don't like the process, and we are spending money, as John McCain used to say, like a drunken sailor.
Yeah, but that insults a drunken sailor. He's spending his own money.
That's right. You guys, the government, can just keep printing money.
Yeah, and you know, John, just 6 months ago, we passed $21 trillion. Not even 6 months ago. We're going to be hitting a $22 trillion debt, national debt, well, probably in another 6, 7 months.
At what point does the cost of servicing that debt become almost insurmountable, where it's eating up a big portion of our budget?
Well, it already is eating up a big portion, and we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. When we get to about 2028, if we have not changed the path we're on, it's going to crowd out so many other things.
Now, the Democrats like to say that the tax cut ballooned the deficit. What do you say?
I say the reason that we've had record revenue the last 6 months, which is we have. Tax revenue has increased, which is what we knew would happen. That happens when you give a tax cut and you reduce regulation and you spur the economy. More economic activity always brings in more tax revenue. We know that. But it does you no good to bring in more tax revenue if you set record amounts of spending.
Do you believe that the president, we can roll tape number 2 if you'd like right now, do you believe the president will get to this issue of spending at some point?
Yeah, he will have to. I don't think he would. I personally think that he looked at this and he was told the only way you're going to get the military funding is with this bill. Which isn't the case. We offered a couple of other alternatives, but I think he does not want this kind of debt or deficit on his head.
You mentioned that one of your amendments was to defund the Mueller investigation. You've been pretty bullish on that, and you've said that this guy needs to be fired.
Yeah.
That's strong language. Isn't the general wisdom in Washington among Republicans, let him finish his work? It's probably going to come out, many feel, in the president's favor. Let him finish. If we fire him now, you've got a Saturday night massacre a la Richard Nixon administration kind of scenario that could be very damaging.
Yeah, but here's what's happening. he had a constitutional constraint that he was to operate in. He has now gone over those boundaries, and he's flooding all other kinds of places. So when he is attacking people from 2009 form filing violations and 2013, his scope under the Constitution was merely campaign-related election tampering by Russia, and specifically with the Trump campaign. Well, they found that there is none. Well, okay, so he's basically there. He hasn't disclosed that, but Comey did, Clapper did, the House Intel Committee did. But he's out here. And so...
And why do you believe that is, Congressman? Why is he straying, much as Ken Starr did from the original against Bill Clinton, was Whitewater, turned into Monica Lewinsky and perjury?
Yeah. I think what happens is they feel, when you're a special counsel, you feel like you have to produce indictments. And right now, the only indictments of any consequence at all that Mueller has brought is against Manafort and Papadopoulos, which has nothing to do with...
What about Flynn?
And well, Flynn as well. But his was he actually told a lie to the FBI about a meeting with somebody in Russia. Had nothing to do with his scope of his investigation.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah.
You graduated U of A.
I did. Yeah.
Shame on you.
I have a degree from ASU as well. Okay?
I know you do. I know you do. Do you believe that the president should sit down with Robert Mueller? Would that bring an end to this? Or do you think that's a fool's errand?
Yeah, I think that's a fool's errand. If I was his counsel, I'd say, we're not sitting down with him.
That's John Dowd.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. Look.
And tell me why, because most people would say, if you have nothing to hide, sit down with the special counsel. Tell me as a lawyer where that can rear up and bite you.
Well, first of all, you have a very loquacious client if you have Donald Trump as your client, number one. Number two, that's how they got John Flynn. John Flynn went in, opened up, very honest in every way, but in a series of multi-houred interviews, they found him on basically a process crime, which is that he told something different here than he did the first time around.
Which technically under the law is a lie.
That's right. And so they could prosecute. So why do that? Why open yourself up to that? It's very hard because memories change, and especially when you're tired after multiple hours of interrogation, things change.
Right. Let me ask you about you. This is something back to Arizona that was interesting, that you got the Senate passing the Ashland Mike Amber Alert in Indian Country Act. Yeah. You were instrumental in this in the House. Tell me what it does, Amber Alert, in the Indian Nation.
Well, right now, there's a hole in the Amber Alert system. So on the 535, roughly 535 Indian reservations in the country, they don't participate in the Amber Alert system.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and really no one did until the Ashland Mike case came out, because you know, it's a remote area anyway. Maybe they don't have all the technology that we do, but what this does is it gives them the training, opportunity to get some equipment and participate in that system, so that if a child's abducted, now we can get it out there and alert it on the reservation and off the reservation as well, like we do anywhere else in the country.
The president has signed it or not?
Not yet. It's in fact, as I was coming in, I was reading a message that they're transmitting from the Senate to the president either today or tomorrow, and then he has 10 days to sign.
Why was this important to you?
I think what was important.
I don't think you have a reservation in your district, do you, or do you?
No, I don't. I'm bordered by two, but I don't have any in there. But you know, I think it's, you know, they're Arizona citizens, they're nationals, you know, they're citizens of the United States, and there should not be a hole there. And you know, we have compassion for the children, and I had a chance to talk with the mom and dad who great advocates of this. I said, this is one we should do.
John McCain was involved in this originally,
Yes,
right?
he was. And so we worked with his office. They were great to work with. He was on this, had the Senate bill. I introduced it on the House, and we just mirrored it up and able to get that
Any
through.
word, as we speak about him, any word on how he's doing?
No word for me. One of his staff persons told me yesterday that he seems to be doing better. But that's the last word I had.
Okay. Let's go to tape number 3. President Trump in the budget he's talked about using military funds now for spending on the border wall. He got well short of what he wanted on the border wall. He got about $25 billion. And he's looking elsewhere to kind of patch it through. Is this a wise use of military dollars, do you believe?
I'm not really excited about the proposition. I'll tell you why. Under the previous administration, the funding for the military was reduced and reduced. We have ships running into each other. We have half the Navy planes can't fly. We've got people who aren't getting the training they need, ammunition, the safety gear that they need. We need to make sure that we bring this back up to where it should be.
You don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Exactly.
Okay.
And let's face it, John, when you start talking about that, and let's look at the other $650 billion that was just in that spending package we just had. I guarantee you that we could find $25 billion in that group, in that set of money, to pay for that wall.
Shouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
One more thing before we take a break. Tape number 4. The president is dealing with the swirling controversy of Playboy playmates Stormy Daniels. You're a religious guy.
Yeah.
How much do you think this will affect the religious right who largely voted for Donald Trump, knowing, I guess, that personally he's got some flaws? I think that's being generous about it. How harmful do you think this stuff is? I've been amazed at the same people who railed against Bill Clinton for this stuff seem curiously silent when it comes to this. And I don't know why. I haven't figured it out.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with that kind of conduct and personal conduct and personal behavior. And but I also know that, no one's perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, and I'm a sinner, and I consider myself a hypocrite, because my goal is to live here, and I don't get there. But
none of us do.
Yeah. But at the same time, when you look at this, I think I had a very interesting conversation about a month and a half ago, right about this time I think this story broke, and with a very religious constituent of mine. And we were talking about, what do you think? She said, look, and I think this is true. She said, I wanted a political leader. I have an ecclesiastical leader. I have a church leader.
Is this a shift?
I think it is a shift.
Because I think we used to look at the president and put the president, although we know historically this kind of stuff's been going on in the White House forever. None of this has, that we know of.
Right.
All this predates his time as president. That's part of it that I think makes it different.
Yeah.
And also that I think Trump never portrayed himself as anything but kind of a ladies' man who got around 3 marriages. He never, what people don't like is a dishonesty.
Right. No, and I think that he's, I guess that's what I mean when I say it's baked in. I think we knew what he was when he got elected.
You were not a supporter, by the way, right?
I said I will support whoever wins the primary. I supported him when he came out with some of his policies and his agenda. I said, that's the agenda that I want.
You were...
I was a little bit later, but...
Cruz, right?
No, I was for Scott Walker, but he was the first guy out.
Walker. Okay.
He was the first guy out, so before this thing ever really got going, Scott
I've had
was
so many of you guys in here, I'm trying to remember who supported whom.
Yeah.
Initially, you supported Scott Walker?
I supported Scott till he
Then Rubio?
Left. Nope.
I'm trying to remember how it went.
No, I supported Scott, and then I stayed out, and then I started watching to hear what was going on. And when I heard some of the policies that Trump was talking about, nobody else was talking about, whether it be immigration issues, whether it be rebuild the military, whether he was talking in America, just we can be great again. On the one hand, I thought that's what I want, and then you have to counterbalance that with some of this other stuff. And I think people said it's baked in. And don't forget also, too, there's been, in my opinion, a tidal wave shift in our cultural mores, if you will.
I agree with
in the
you.
last 25 years.
I agree with you.
So,
one more thing before we go.
Yeah.
Heritage Foundation, I think, recently said that his first year, now very conservative group, more effective than Ronald Reagan's first year.
Yes, I was there when they said that.
That is an astonishing statement.
Well, you wouldn't know it because the media accolades aren't there. But when you look at the tax reform package that he got through, that's dynamic. If you look at the regulatory reform, that's incredible. When you look at the rebuilding of the military, when you look at the foreign policy wins that he's had that nobody really gathers and pays attention to.
We're going to talk about some of that in the next segment, by the way.
Right, and then you had a Neil Gorsuch and 14 constitutional conservative federal court judges Nobody's had that kind of record in 50 years.
Do you believe, well, let me start with, what don't you like about where he's taking the country?
My biggest concern was exactly what we were talking about with regard to that spending bill. I really felt we needed a veto, presidential veto. It would have sent everybody back to the table. I think it would have given him more cachet, more power dealing with the Congress.
He threatened to veto it, he just didn't in the end.
Yeah, and I was excited when he said he was going to veto it, and I was out there, yeah, let's veto it. And then when I heard that he was going to have lunch with General Mattis, I said, oh, he's going to sign the bill.
Interesting. All right, back with Congressman Biggs in a moment, and when we come back, Kim Jong-un and the summit that right now appears to be on with President Trump and the North Korean leader. Will it bear fruit, or is the president walking into a trap? Back in a minute with Congressman Andy Biggs. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. He is a representative of the 5th District of Arizona, which includes Mesa, Gilbert, Chandler, Queen Creek. Before we get into Kim Jong-un and the president's meetings, how are things going in Washington right now? We're in an election year, obviously. What does an election year do to the process?
Well, I think you can take it, this is either good or bad, but it slows down the process.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who once said gridlock in Washington is a good thing because you don't want these guys doing too much.
That's exactly right, and I tend to agree with that. So what's happening is Congress is pacing it very slowly, and from this point on, you're going to see maybe one or two bigger initiatives, but they're going to be slowly, very deliberatively brought forward. I'm talking like maybe welfare reform or something like that. It slows it down quite a bit and really emphasizes. And don't forget, we've had a bunch of special elections as well,
right,
which has distracted as well.
We've got one here in Arizona.
We do.
Do you believe that Republicans will lose the House in November?
I did not think we would lose the House in November. But unless we are able to keep up the economic rally, which I think is critical, and I think we also need to remind people of what the Trump agenda is and how much we've actually accomplished. We forget how much we've actually accomplished. We have to nail that. If you look at the Saccone race in Pennsylvania 18, the Republican versus the Democrat, it was the Democrat that basically ran to Trump and talked about smaller
ran
government.
Against, away from Nancy Pelosi,
exactly.
Ironically.
And our guy, you know, he was a good candidate. People say, oh, he was a good candidate, a veteran, hero, all of the same things. But we didn't run towards President Trump. We needed to make the distinction that this guy is going to help the Trump agenda get through.
So you think the Trump agenda is still a selling point for Republicans?
I do. I think it is. I think in the...
Isn't this ironic? I mean, so many Republicans were freaked out that President Trump was elected. They're like, what's happening in the party? Jeff Flake, you know Jeff very well.
Yeah. It's still that way. I mean...
Was Jeff wrong?
Jeff's talking about a moral imperative, and I think that it's an important voice to have out there, but I think that I think, and I'm not going to be critical of Jeff because I know he's a very principled guy and this is where he's going, but I will say this. I think the American people are looking for us to become the great country that is known to have an exceptional spirit. And we've kind of lost that, and we have a chance to get it back.
When Democrats are arguing that Republicans are spending us right over the fiscal cliff, your response is what?
Yeah, well, it certainly takes one to know one. I can tell you that. When I saw, look, the Democrats put out a budget that would have caused us to have to raise taxes by $10 trillion over 10 years. That's what they put out last fall. So I guess they know what they're talking about. I'm embarrassed that we're not moving towards a balanced budget, but I do think that's the pot calling the kettle black.
Let's roll tape number 5. This is Kim Jong-un. Now I mean, President Trump's been tweeting it. It looks like this summit is going to happen. We don't know where. There's a bunch of options on the table.
Hopeful tweet
It might end
Wednesday.
up being in the demilitarized zone. It could be in China, I suppose. What do you expect may come of this? Is Donald Trump walking into a trap?
I don't think he's walking into a trap. What I'm hoping will come of this is that that President Trump can convey to Kim Jong-un that he's serious, that he is a serious person. I mean, I think the bellicosity of President Trump has actually caused movement on Kim Jong-un's part. I think he's actually willing, at least I believe, in some respect, to ratchet down his nuclear program. I don't know that we should believe that, but...
Would he be willing to give up his nuclear armaments, which are essentially propping him up as a dictator?
Yeah.
If he gives those up, I would say he's finished, much like Muammar Gaddafi.
I think, though, that what he's looking for is a couple things, and that is respect and stability.
Could he exist without those weapons?
I think he could.
Wow.
Provided this, he would need he needs a lot of conditions, a lot of variables there. China would have to continue to prop him up the way they've been doing. South Korea would have to continue its move towards rapprochement, at least as far as interactions between the two sides. And what he really wants more than anything is he wants the U.S. to kind of stand down. And I think the president has been masterful in this by having the war games and the exercises over there in that area. It demonstrates again and again our power and projects that power. I think that bothers Kim Jong-un.
Political question. I've wondered this, and I thought I'd ask you. Has anybody looked at the demographic shifts of blue states migrating, folks from blue states migrating to places like Arizona? When we talk about Arizona becoming a purple state, does this demographic shift hasten that?
Yeah, I think it does, and people have looked at it. For instance, I want to say New York's lost over 1 million people in a shift.
But they're going somewhere.
They're going to Florida, mostly.
Okay, now those are primarily Democrats?
Hard to say. We think that they're high-income earners, and they're going to actually tax-free havens,
okay.
So there's no income tax
So
in
they
Florida
might be
or Texas. Republicans.
We don't know.
We don't know. No one's told us where they're registering. I think it's hard to say. I know that there's always concern because we see a lot of Californians coming here. A lot of them, they may be Republicans, but they say, you know, in California we did it this way. That's great, but in Arizona we do it this way. And the reason we do it this way is because we want to be more respectful of individual rights, for instance.
And California is the biggest feeder now to Arizona. It used to be the Midwest, now it's California.
Yes,
right?
Yes, that's right.
So the politicos are looking at how this may change things demographically. May make Arizona a purple state sooner rather than later?
It could. I don't think so. I think there are other things that would drive that before that. But I think that as long as I mean, you got to keep faith with what got you there, and that's the platform issues. We're very divided on the platform issues. The sub-issues like the Ashland Mike bill, we come together across lines. But the part
taxes.
Yes, taxes, regulation, you know, even infrastructure, military, all those things that we can, life issue, all those things that are over here.
They're tough ones to find common ground.
It's tough to find the common ground.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, what happens with DACA? We'll talk about that with Congressman Andy Biggs. Back in a moment on Newsmaker Sunday. Final moments with Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman serving his first term, finishing out his first term as the representative of District 5 in Mesa, Republican. Any chance DACA will have any movement this year, do you think?
I don't think so. I think that I've made my position very clear, but I will just say that I don't think that you're going to see a movement on DACA one way or the other. I think I'm going to say this very clearly, I think both parties are using DACA as wedge issue.
Right. I've heard this over and over. Yeah. That really the politicians may not want to solve it because it's a great issue to have.
Yeah, I mean,
to rally your base.
I mean, think about it. When President Trump during the inauguration said 5.2 million people and we're going to do this and that, I just asked for the wall and a couple other things. If I was Chuck Schumer, if I really wanted that population,
10 seconds.
I would have agreed with that. I would have jumped up. But I'm not Chuck Schumer. Yeah. I'm Andy Biggs. So.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming on the program. Yeah. Congressman Andy Biggs, we'll have you back. And be careful back there. It's a crazy place. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday.